Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Nick, and I will be your host today for another insightful webinar presented by LiveRent. For those who are unfamiliar with LiveRent, LiveRent is a secure all-in-one platform that digitizes and accelerates the rental process. Renters can search through verified listings, send digital applications, sign tenancy contracts online, pay rent online, which in fact benefits all landlords. Sorry, there was some feedback. But so all these features I will discuss later, but I want to introduce my guest speaker, Kevin Wang from the W Brothers Real Estate Group. Kevin has been using our LiveRent platform for many years and has kindly offered his time in presenting this webinar with me. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Nick. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I've been with LiveRent since, I don't know, 2019.
Yeah, I believe so, actually.
A lot of good experience with the team. And we've been six years in the rental management business. Right now, we have 5 people on the team. We are licensed under McDonald Property Management, one of the biggest property management company in Vancouver. Currently, our team manages 250 properties, mostly slightly luxury and pricier properties. So one of the first property management using, I think what we with a really good run with you guys.
Perfect. Well, we can hear you definitely. You're fine, Kevin. But thanks for your intro. And let's take a look at our topic today. 4 easy and effective ways to maximize your rental property. Whether you're a new landlord about to list your first ever unit, a seasoned property manager like Kevin with a big portfolio, or someone looking to purchase your first investment property, you'll want to keep these tips handy, especially in 2021 because of these crazy COVID times. So, before we begin, let's take a look at who we have in our audience today based on our registration survey. I see that over half of the audience are landlords, which is great because I'm sure you will take away a lot of information today. I see we also have 24% of you guys as property managers, 12% as realtors, and that's great. I hope we can provide enough data and market insight that you can bring back to your team as well as help grow your business. So a couple of housekeeping items before we start for our audience to maximize your live stream experience. Number 1, remember to turn off your ad blocker. Number 2, if you haven't yet, please create an account so you can unlock the side panel features, which includes our prize draws. And remember, you can always chat with us during this webinar at any time. So number 3 is please submit any questions you have, and we'll get to it during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have any live questions, our LiveRent agents will be online to answer any immediate questions you may have. All right, so now to the fun part. For those of you joining us the first time, there is a prize draw at the end of the webinar. The prize, $100 Amazon gift cards. Unfortunately, I cannot enter the draw, but for our audience, there are 3 chances to win. So 3 winners. And here's how you can enter the draw. You navigate to the giveaway panel on the right side of this live stream. Complete the specified actions and click Submit Entry. For each completed action means an additional raffle entry, and that's right, you can have up to 5 entries for our raffle draw. And again, as a reminder, remember to click Submit Entry once you complete the actions. Now that everyone has the details on making the most of this webinar, let's dive right in and explore how the rental market has changed recently due to the pandemic and the restrictions and effect it ultimately has on the rental market. Rental markets were severely shaken up during COVID. Last year, it was crazy, even for myself as a landlord. Like across the major Canadian cities, Toronto had the highest percentage in drop in rental price, and Vancouver actually had the lowest. I just want to make a quick note here. We're going to be mentioning a lot of Toronto stats because we're expanding into LiveRent, we're expanding into Toronto, and we have actually acquired abundance of statistics and data. And it's always good to compare our 2 cities just because, we want to see where the market is similar and where it differs. And then we can actually engage in the trends to see how we can actually maximize our rental return. So in Toronto, the demand severely declined as people such as immigrants, international students, out of province workers just completely stopped entering the province. And to further increase the rental supply, Airbnb owners who saw a decline in rent actually converted their units to long term. And lastly, new pre-sale buildings that completed last year further increased the rental supply. We're talking about a couple buildings in downtown that have 200 units. People have bought pre-sales and collected keys, and it's flooded the market. So, Kevin, would you agree that these factors in Toronto actually is similar to Vancouver? As have you seen an increase in rental supply in Vancouver over the years? Because statistics have shown that I've seen a lot of units being converted into rentals, especially because people were concerned about the speculation tax, the empty homes tax. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Mickey, you're definitely right. But I do have some good news as well after everything happened here. So it is like any other business, is supply and demand. And the empty home tax in Vancouver and BC speculation tax certainly increases supply in the market, which lead to a drop in rent a few years back. But it's kind of slowly coming back with the supply kind of diminish and the demand stay the same. But with COVID, what happened is there's a decrease in demand in the beginning because no one's moving, no one's coming back. Certainly with empty homes, there's a drop in rent because people want to rent it out, they want to lower their rent, right? But currently, the good news is in Vancouver, not too sure about Toronto, there's an increased demand in a larger home. For say, people are moving from smaller unit to townhomes, to single family houses, to a larger unit. And then because they need an office at home and they spend more time at home. So they tend to move to those properties, and we see a big demand in those properties. And then we have very successful, the beginning of January this year, to rent out a lot of units. And of course, on the other side is, as you mentioned, there's our supply in condos, and then also there's a decrease in the demand in the condos due to the restricted inflow of the new people. For instance, like students, visitors, right now are not coming back. So that's one factor that affected the condo demand.
All right.
Which drive the price down. Yes.
Oh, so that means like as prices go down, that's why it's a renter's market, and this webinar is designed to actually help you as a landlord how to maximize your rental property income, especially in these times. As Kevin said, like people are not coming into the city, and when there's that much supply, you're going to need to stand out. So I couldn't agree with you more, Kevin. Which property managers need and landlords need to prep for success in 2021. And in today's webinar, we will be exploring these 4 topics. Location. We will reveal insights on which locations to consider in Vancouver and Toronto as a comparison for a higher rental return. And number 2, foundation. How to pick the right property type to invest in. A comparison of condo versus detached homes and furnished versus unfurnished. And the third topic we're going to explore is lead generation. How to attract and actively acquire qualified leads. And the fourth subtopic we're going to discuss is automation, how you can automate your rental process and decrease your vacancy rate. So before we get started, throughout our webinar, we will be conducting polls to better understand our audience. And we're about to conduct our first poll. What brings you here today? This will let us know how we can actually help you maximize your rental investment. The poll results are actually in. So 41% of the audience have voted my listings are vacant. Okay, so that's why you're here at this webinar. You want to get your property rented out. So let's dive right in to see how we can help you with that. As I mentioned earlier, interesting statistics have shown that rental prices have actually increased out of the city cores. So in Vancouver, downtown, the city core, we've actually seen prices increase in areas like Burnaby, Coquitlam, and Kevin, why do you think this is happening? Or why are the prices in these areas that, traditionally the density of each city, the rental market, the rental units are all in the city core. But now it seems that, units outside of the city core is actually rising. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, with the COVID in place, as you know, a lot of people are not going back to the office. They're working from home. The overall demand, the good news is the overall demand of rental is slowly coming back, especially in BC here, in Vancouver. But the demand has changed. for say people moving out from the core and the populated area and move to suburban cores, which good transit connecting point. For say Coquitlam, Port Moody, North Vancouver, North Burnaby, where people can enjoy more space with the same rent. For instance, we have downtown unit, one bedroom in one bedroom, 550 square foot downtown Vancouver. You're looking at $2,300 per month. But if you want to have a two bedroom in Port Moody, North Vancouver, or even Burnaby North, you are spending about $2,300 per month with same rent with almost double of your space. So people with working from home, they can use the other room as an office. And this is the trend this year. We see a lot of people moving out from core area to further out with the transit, and they can enjoy more space with the same rent.
Oh, that's actually interesting. So what you just said is actually leading to our next slide is, being next to a transportation hub is actually super important. And for our audience, here are some interesting statistics for you to see. There's a map right here that shows furnished one-bedroom prices that are average furnished one-bedroom prices that are near SkyTrain centers. As you can see in Vancouver, hot areas include waterfront, $2,200 roughly, Broadway City Halls, which is by Vancouver General Hospital there, for $1,650. And interestingly, if you see the stats right here, Lougheed Town Center for $1,675. That's in Burquitlam right there. But that price is almost as close to East Vancouver, Joyce Collingwood, $1,695. So I mean, Kevin, like, your thoughts again on being next to a transportation hub. How crucial is this that when it comes to finding a renter for your property?
It is very, very crucial to be close to transit. In Vancouver, I think SkyTrain plays a big role here. It's actually pretty interesting to see the number. It is very correct. And I see a big jumps in those areas with transportations going into downtown Vancouver. So people are moving out. Now the price has gone up quite a lot. And I would say that even going forward, because the transit-oriented area have more life necessities around it, like the bank, superstore, shopping centers all around it. So people will think, okay, whether or not I should live downtown and spend $400 more, or I should live a little bit further out with 30 minutes to downtown Vancouver if I ever need to go there, and I spend less money and enjoy the similar type of lifestyle, right? You have everything around you. So the transit-oriented area, definitely we should look into that as an investment.
Okay, perfect. I mean, and just on the same topic, not everybody has parking spots for their condo units, as well as how can people maximize their rental units if they're not, let's just say they're not near a transportation hub, what can they do to really push their rental unit listing? I mean, based on what you said, being next to a transportation hub is crucial, but not everyone is next to a SkyTrain station. So what are some other roles that things that they can do?
If you're not, so when we are helping our clients to purchase a unit for rental or anything, I would certainly suggest them to buy a parking spot, because if you're not connected to a transit, you wanted to make sure that you have a parking spot so that they can drive around, right? If you are right on transit, right on SkyTrain, a parking is a bonus, but it's not a necessary thing to rent out your unit, right? So that's something you want to consider. Buy a parking when you purchase a property.
Okay. And actually, I live in a condo too in downtown, and I see that people, if their renter does not actually need a parking spot, some people have actually rented separately their parking spot for additional income. Have you seen this with your clients?
Yeah, definitely. So some people like to do that with option to rent parking on top of the rent. And then some tenant, they don't need a parking, right? So they can save $100, $150 for not renting a parking. And the owner is getting the same because they're renting that to other people. And there's always demand in renting a parking stall. So it's a good strategy when you think about that.
So yeah, I mean, because that's what I've done so far too for my investment property. If my tenant doesn't need it, hey, and they don't, I can re-rent it out for money. But that's great. All right, so another poll that was conducted just now was where are you looking to invest in 2021? So 45% of the audience has said suburban neighborhoods, and 40% of the audience voted downtown core. Okay, so yeah, that is interesting. Suburban neighborhood. So there's half and half of you from the audience is actually one on the end, one on the other side. But that's great to know. All right, so now that we've covered location, it's time to move on to foundation, the building blocks and strategies in choosing the right property type to invest in. All right, so if we look at the current data this month, we can actually see the gross yield for popular investment property types in Vancouver and Toronto. And based on current average rent taken from our rent report and property values from Zolo, here are the estimates. Compared to Toronto, we can see, and the charts are in front of you, the audience, we can see that the Vancouver has a GRY of 3.95% for one-bedroom condos, 3.45% for two-bedroom condos, and 2.78% for detached homes. I just want to mention that these do not take into account of costs like property taxes and strata fees, but it does give you a good guideline. So based off these numbers, Kevin, the audience right now has voted 45% suburban neighborhood and 40% downtown core. Like, is it better to invest in a one-bedroom condo in downtown or a four-bedroom house in the suburbs? What is your take?
It's a great question, and it's an open-ended question. I think people who voted both, 45% or 40%, they're all kind of correct. So that's I have a few things I want to talk about. So overall, the return would be similar. Like you're looking at the net return because in condos, you have a strata fee, right? You have to think about, and then you have insurance you have to think about. So those things you have to deduct from your rental income. So you're looking at the net rent, maybe similar. So looking at the investment point of view, and you have to look at the cash flow, which is the rent, and then also the appreciation. So the trend where people are going, right? So the trend with people now is moving out from the core, where we do see a slow recovery of the rent in those areas and then the price in the core area. So the suburban area has increased in demand in both sales and rentals with the COVID. So because people wanted to have more space, like I mentioned before. So if you're investing in the suburban area, yes, that's a good strategy. However, there's one big thing that you want to consider now is because people are moving out to the suburban area, so the demand has high, and while the supply remain the same, so the price has gone up a little bit, and then people are not looking at the core area, so the price has not been increased. So if you wanted to increase in the core areas, right now is a good time because there are abundant of supply, so you can negotiate your price. So you're looking at whether or not you're looking at the price that's become a little bit similar to the core with the suburban area. So right now, you may want to think about, okay, should I go back to the core where the rent will probably stay the same, not too much a difference, but if you're thinking about long-term appreciation, maybe you can consider the core area as well, the good areas, the good buildings.
All right, perfect. And I just want to mention, like I did a webinar maybe 2 weeks ago, and the guest speaker from Toronto has mentioned that she's finding that 2 bedrooms is actually very hot right now in the Toronto market, and the reason why is, like you said, people can't afford or 1-bedroom units right now because of the pandemic, and you know what, it's easier to find a friend or to live with, or even, you know what, if they're not going back to the office, use a second bedroom. But she said that mainly is because people cannot, paying for a 1-bedroom unit for $1,800 as opposed to $2,500 for 2 bedrooms, and 2 people share the price. Do you find that happening right now in Vancouver too?
Yeah, I think Nick mentioned about really good point. I think similar to Toronto's situation, people are moving into bigger units. So the 2-bedroom has actual bedroom can be an office. Maybe they only have, the couples living in a 2-bedroom using 1 bedroom in the office, the other one that's sleeping. So they are moving from the smaller one to a bigger one. I do see that trend in Vancouver as well for the last 6 months, definitely.
That is interesting, and I hope like the audience, if you have a 2-bedroom unit, you know what, it's actually quite a hot commodity right now. All right, so on the chart that you guys see, there's also what we call the turnover rate. And turnover rate is also something to consider when evaluating your investment property. How it's calculated is actually right there. But, Kevin, what type of property, in your experience, has the highest turnover rate? And, will turnover rates continue to increase throughout, 2021?
Very good question. Because a lot of people, when they're looking at their investment property, they wanted to know how much they can rent it for, right? They want to rent for the highest amount of dollar, but you have to look at what's the turnover rate as well. Because every turnover, you will probably face some vacancy time and then some cost of having a new tenant coming in. From my personal experience, a smaller unit for say a studio, and then the super luxury property, the higher turnover rate. A family-oriented property like a bigger two-bedroom, small three-bedroom, or townhomes have a have a lower turnover rate because when people living in those units, they tend to buy a lot of things, and then for them, it's harder for them to move with a family, right? With a studio, one person is always easier to move. With the super luxury properties, people will say, okay, do I want to buy something with my rent, or do I want to still renting? So I think for the family oriented properties are better for a less turnover rate, which at the end will generate a better return overall.
Okay. Right? And I have a quick question too. I've heard from some of my friends that are property managers that have mentioned to me sometimes they prefer having tenants that actually have young children or even infants, just because they don't move that often. If you have a tenant that has an infant, they might actually be there for 2 or 3 years. And what's your policy on that? I know some landlords don't like to, maybe like prefer not to have kids, but you know what? If you can actually ensure a tenant to stay there for 2, 3 years, especially in pandemic, like that's actually a bonus. What do you think about that, Kevin?
Yeah, a lot of owners have the same similar concern about having young kids because, as we all know, young kids may make some damages to the property. But yes, they tend to stay longer. If a property is big enough to host their family, they tend to stay a longer term because for them to move is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
If it's a couple to move around, it's not that hard. With a family of four, if you think about all their furniture, belonging, toys, and everything else, it's just so hard. And then that mental barrier will keep them staying there. I have a townhouse out in Surrey. The tenant has been there for 4 years now. Yeah,
Wow.
they have two kids.
Wow.
House, perfect. And then for them to move, no.
Okay. And on top for that on that topic, every year do you increase the rent? Because a lot of landlords have I see always have questions on, can we increase the rent per year? Based off obviously the allowable rental increase. But for families that stay on for 4 years, like what's your policy as a property manager? How do you engage the tenant to actually increase the rent? Because you know what, in the end, landlord, I want to make more money.
For sure. You know what? Great tenants are priceless. So I think it all depends on who they are. If they are a good tenant, paying rent on time, taking care of your property, and also you want to look at the market price, not how much you can increase, right? For say last year, the price maybe was 2,500. This year, it's actually dropped because of COVID. You want to increase your rent to the government standard? Maybe not.
Yeah.
You want to make them happy and stay longer so that they don't move. It's always about give or take. It's not always about how much I can increase. It's how long I can retain my tenant. But if if the rent is too low, I would definitely suggest the owner to increase the rent over time because that little incremental increase will help you in the long run. If you're underpriced, it's harder for you to come back to the market. Right? If your price is already there, maybe think about staying there. If not there, slowly moving up. So it's the market is the big role in there.
Okay, that's good to know, and that's a good takeaway actually. And just one more point I want to bring up was, you said that one bedroom condos were actually the highest turnover rates, just because students and students or younger professionals tend to relocate often, and last year was a crazy year, and like landlords have been worrying about rent default and breach of contract. Is do you see this happening more often? And how do landlords protect themselves from like higher turnover rates for one bedroom condos?
Um, I mean, everything goes, a coin goes two sides, and the one bedroom do have a bigger turnover rate, but they also is easier to fill.
Okay.
Surprisingly, last year we didn't have a lot of default on our portfolio. I think that whoever you choose as a tenant is very very critical. We have about only maybe one or two tenants kind of delay on their rent, but not paying rent. The one bedrooms are filled up quickly, even though the turnover is higher. So I have to say, when we look at things, two sides, it was overall it was okay. Maybe even in Vancouver. I'm not too sure about Toronto.
Okay. That's perfect. So I'm just gonna scroll over here, and we are going to be moving on to our next topic. Sorry, my screen just kind of froze, but all right. So one thing that I wanted to mention quickly again was how do we actually prevent turnover rates? And a lot of the times at LiveRent, we tell our users and especially our landlords, screening is very important. Like, if you can screen your tenants and understand their personal background, their financial background, hey, you're not going to be in for a lot of surprises. So LiveRent actually has a integrated Live score that helps speed up this process because information like credit history, employment information, criminal check, references is all combined into an overall score, essentially giving you, the landlord, a complete snapshot of your applicant. And that is why we also encourage all our tenants to complete their profile, because then time is not wasted from landlord asking you all these questions. And once you have entered it in and it's verified by our compliance team, you become a verified applicant, and the information is saved, and every time you apply, it just pops up. So it's super easy. Everything is streamlined for the purpose of making your renting easier. All right, so I'm just going to move on to the results for the poll that we conducted. What type of properties are you considering investing in 2021? So 53% of the audience voted one bedroom condo. 21% have voted two bedroom condo. A comment was raised from one of the audience member. From Eric, looking into two bedroom, lots of tenants looking for extra space these days. Oh, great. That's good to hear. Which is reflective of what you said, Kevin, earlier.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's move to the next question that we often see is, should we furnish our unit? Will furnishing my suite actually get me a higher rent, or will furnishing my suite get my unit rented faster? So despite the fact that furnished rentals have dropped after COVID, it shows in the numbers still that furnished units actually yield a higher ROI in the long run. As COVID restrictions are relaxed, demand for furnished suites will return. And in Vancouver, from our charts, you can see furnished one bedrooms still average around $1,923, and unfurnished one bedroom averages around $1,692. Kevin, from your experience, would you say you are actually team furnished or team unfurnished?
Personally, being in the business for 6 years, I have seen a lot of units. I prefer unfurnished overall, even though the furnished property will give you more rent, but we have to consider turnover rate as well. Because when people are not bringing their furniture, the turnover rate seems to be a little bit higher because the barrier of moving has become smaller, right? I can just grab my bag and go. However, yes, if you have a furnished unit that's furnished nicely with good furnitures and then all the kitchen supply and everything in place, when we go back, when the post COVID, after COVID's gone, people are coming back, the furnished unit probably give you more rent. But you got to be prepared that you need more work for the furnished unit because there might be things broken up and the turnover is higher. So just a little bit more work for the owner. But if you are long-term thinking investors, maybe unfurnished, kind of easier for you.
Okay. Thanks for sharing on that. All right, so now that we've covered how to choose your rental investment based on location and property type, it's time to look at tips about managing your rental property. For landlords and property managers, you're not going to want to miss this because the next step is about lead generation. We're talking about mula, cheddar, ka-ching ching. So we'll be covering the topics in two parts: attracting tenants with passive lead generation and acquiring tenants with active lead generation. When supply, we've said that before, when supply is abundant and not enough demand, the market is essentially a renter's market. So what we mean is renters have the luxury of shopping around for the best price unit. So Kevin, what's your advice when it comes to a renter's market?
Well, in anything else, people like to work with people who provide good information, who provide professional photos in the rental business. I would go for you wanted to have all the photos professionally taken, very good description of what it is. That will attract tenant to talk to you first, right? So they will talk to whoever they think have the most reasonable and relevant information. So that part is you need to prepare that. With LiveRent platform, I found that's pretty easy.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to hear. And on the LiveRent platform, landlords actually have a dashboard, and I know you've been using it because we've been chatting about this before. On LiveRent, the listing platform actually has a dashboard that can show you insights how your rental price is compared to similar properties in the same rental area. So if your property is priced, say 10% higher, you know what, your rental property is probably not going to get rented. And another feature that it shows is how many times your page is visited. So again, if your property is even 5% higher, 10% higher, you're probably not going to get the amount of page visits as others that are competitively priced. And has this dashboard come in handy for you, Kevin?
Oh, certainly. This is so helpful, and it's very easy to use though. When I'm talking to my clients about how much their property worth, and I can share them the statistic. And also when I give them feedback after a week or 2 weeks, say, okay, your price is 10% above the average price in the neighborhood. So that's why your hit is lower than the other ones. It gave them very nice statistics about how they are doing. So this is a good way for me to approach them and say, okay, maybe we should lower the rent a little bit, right? If I price it too low, then I say, well, we should go up the rent a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So that is a super good thing for me.
Mm-hmm. So pricing is key. When people talk about pricing too high, but sometimes renters want to get their rental, their unit rented ASAP. So you can also use it to see if you want to price it a little lower than the market to, hey, you know what, might attract a client. Have you ever done that before? Just price it below the market, just try to get it faster, like rent it out faster.
Yes, certainly. When the supply is flooded, so we wanted to rent out of our property as soon as possible, because the sooner you get a rent, the sooner you make money. Right? Yeah. If the property too high, no one's coming, then the vacancy time will kill you.
Yeah. And then hey, like mortgage is being paid and you're still strata fees. So okay. And next topic is, how important is it to input your data? So inputting your data is crucial because people need to know what they're going to rent before they even go see the unit. In Toronto, I've in my last webinar, the guest speaker actually said, if there is no data that we put on the listing, people aren't even going to call you. So inputting data on LiveRent is actually so simple because it's click of a button. Tenants want to know, hey, is it pet friendly? Am I paying for hydro? Am I paying for heating? Is it furnished? Do I have a locker or a parking? So, putting the information relevant, like having nice photos is still very important, but you know what? You need to actually put all the relevant, even the minute details into your rental listing. So, once you have the information inputted, then you can actually start marketing your property. So one way that we've seen a lot of landlords on our platform have done is, putting their listing on our featured listings to maximize exposure for their property. So it's like Google. If you are on the top of the list, you know what? You're going to be clicked more often. So, the higher the exposure, the higher chance of getting rented out. And one thing right now is for our audience members, you can actually claim an exclusive offer of 50% off featured listings with LiveRent by clicking on the on-screen pop-up. So Kevin, I want to know is how do you market your properties? I've seen your listings on the featured listings section many times. Has it helped?
Certainly, it's easier for people just to click on the featured listing instead of going through a lot of listings. First of all, as you said, I want to make sure all the photos are good, all the content information are correct. I found that I use a lot of platform. I found the LiveRent platform is really, really easy to work. And I do have feature listings for the one that are not renting out as fast, especially these days with the condos are not going fast enough. So I want how my clients, I want to put them on a feature listing so that give me more exposure. Of course, making sure when people contact you, you do get back to them.
Okay, perfect. So on to our next section is because of social distance, there has been a wide adoption of technology, and we saw a complete shift online for both landlords and renters. Video tours, 3D video tours, Matterport live showings have become the new thing. And Kevin, I know you've done a lot of these things before. You want to share with our audience how these new ways of marketing has helped your business?
I do videos for all my properties. I'm trying to. It's so easy for a tenant to look at what the property looks like in the actual video instead of on the photo, and it saved me a lot of time going through unnecessary showings if they don't like certain part of the property when they see the video, and it's in one place. So when they click on listings on LiveRent, they will see the photo. They can click on the videos. It's perfect. I love it. And I'll continue using that after the COVID. I started when the COVID hits, but I'm going to use it after that too.
That's good. I've also noticed that you actually do some personal real estate videos in market videos, right?
Yeah. We try to do something different.
Okay. And the audience, remember, we're going to present Kevin's information at the end. So, if you want to see these videos for market insights or contact Kevin for questions, we will present his contact information later on. And one thing I want to also dive into right now is landlords need to be engaging with tenants, especially in this market today, in a slow market. You can't just sit and wait around for a tenant to come. Sometimes you actually need to, get up and engage in looking for an applicant. And one thing that we actually have on LiveRent is a suggested tenant tab. So if your property has been idle for a couple of days, landlords can actually actively search for applicants that are on LiveRent because, the list of these renters is actually generated based on the filters they select. When the filters are a match to your property, they'll show up and then you can directly start chatting with them. Kevin, have you used this feature before?
Yeah, I certainly did. So what I did is when I see the suggested tenant, I will go through their portfolio first. If they have a good comprehensive portfolio about who they are, I'll start chatting with them, right? And then this is really helpful for me to know who I'm chatting to, and also for the tenant because they can also see who I am on the other side. So that feature works out really well. In a slower market, we need to be very proactive.
Okay. No, that's good. I mean, like I said, you can't just sit on your butt anymore, right? So you actually need to, get to work. So all the tools are here on the platform for you to use. So make use of it, right? All right. So before we begin our final topic, we have one last poll. And which part of your rental process have you automated? All right. Good. And what do we mean by automation and automated? It pays to be streamlined because if you're not organized and if you don't have a fast response time, your tenant will actually lease somewhere else. Like to the audience, I want to ask you this. How long does it take for you to list your rental? Are you sharing your rental across multiple platforms? Are you responding to prospective tenants fast enough? Like, what are your thoughts on automation, Kevin?
Well, in my business, it's very time consuming to do a lot of things on different platform and with a lot of information in place. With LiveRent, I try to streamline everything as much as possible, from listing the property, from application, all the way to signing contract. That saves me tons of time. As a property manager, the much of time I can save, the more big deal I can do, right?
Mm.
So I try to do everything automated as much as possible, and then the platform serves good purpose on that.
Okay, that's perfect. I mean, that's good to hear. And then, last year we saw many new landlords also adopt Livrent to help streamline their process in that they, used our pre-filled building details to list faster. I mean, like if you have a condo, let's just say I live in 610 Granville, which is called the Hudson. All I have to do when I want to rent out that listing is I type 610 Granville and boom, the Hudson shows up and how many floors, how many units, what are the amenities, so we have already pre-filled almost, all the buildings, all the condos in Vancouver, in Greater Vancouver, and now we're actually filling up our database in Toronto too. So, for landlords, it's so easy. Just type in your address and voila, you're going to see all the building information. And also, what we've also done is listing syndication. So it'll immediately share on different platforms like Kijiji, Craigslist, Facebook groups, so to maximize exposure, because, in the end is the more reach you have, the faster you're going to get your property rented. So another thing we've automated, again, what Kevin said, is the contract creation. Like, why do we have this? Like, in my experience is that whenever you fill out a contract, there's always room for error, like the misspelt of names or misspelt or dates being entered wrong. So, when on Livrent, when a tenant actually applies, all that information automatically loads up into a contract. When you say create contract, I mean, it's simple as one click away. And we're currently using the BC Standard Tenancy Act, but we will be having custom contracts, including for Ontario, coming soon. So, yeah, Kevin, like you've been using our digital contracts for a while. What are your thoughts?
Easy and save time. Less human errors, because human makes mistakes. I can't, computer don't.
Oh, okay. And also, I know that you actually have a lot of overseas clients too, so that's actually helped a lot, right?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I try to do everything remotely with whatever we can do online.
Okay. So final poll results that we just conducted, 29% of the audience voted automated responses to tenant inquiries. Okay. 29% of the audience voted digital application contracts. And then another comment from the audience, digital storage. Oh, I recommend all landlords to get on this if they haven't. Such a game changer. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that comment. And digital storage is something that, we've recently started talking about. Just last week, one of our landlords was talking about going paperless, and he started using Livrent as a digital storage cabinet to save all his contracts and applications and other files. So each listing has what we can call a digital storage. You have your contracts, your applications, including your chats too. So it's a one-stop for you to keep organized, so you don't need to look at your phone. Before, when I rented out my properties in the past, I have to look at my WhatsApp, my email. It's just crazy, right? So having one place it just makes life completely easier. So Kevin, what are you, I know that as a business you guys have obviously like your own separate storage, but how have you made use of this on Livrent actually?
To be honest, I haven't started using that because we have a different policy in the company. But what I would say is having everything in one place, all the communication, and also having all my team on the platform, so I can help out if there are any questions they may have. So for say in the chat, we can have 3 people in there: myself, the other team on mine, and then the tenant. So I can give feedback right away, and then I can trace back to what has happened from before.
Well, that's actually interesting, yeah, because actually, when I think about it, you and all your team members are actually on the Livrent platform. So for companies like yourself, you can actually have, you're the owner, you're the administrator, and then you have sub agents that can actually be on the same platform, and you can actually oversee what they do and share listings and share who will be the signing agent. And basically, again, like you said, like it can actually really help a business too, because everything keeps organized under one umbrella.
Exactly.
Okay, that's perfect. So, this pretty much wraps up our webinar. And I just want to say thank you again to Kevin for his insight. We're going to move into our Q&A soon, but I hope what was discussed has been insightful and that the audience has a lot to take away. So on to our Q&A session. Thank you to everyone that submitted a question into our live chat. So I'm just gonna quickly look at the audience questions. Okay, as these questions are being loaded up. Okay, so here's a question from Jessica. Hi, I'm looking into investing into a condo or a property. I was wondering if you can share insight in regards to what banks are looking for in terms of rental return and mortgage amount. Kevin?
Oh, so we're talking about.
Yeah, this audience member is wondering if you can share insight in regards to what banks are looking for in terms of rental return and mortgage amount.
Oh, okay. That's a hard question for me. I think it's probably a good question for a mortgage broker.
Okay.
Mortgage bank is good for that. But I know there are a lot of banks that are looking at the rental income when they are giving out mortgages. Okay. So if you are buying a property, you want to make sure that you know how much your property can rent it for, and okay. that's important. Also going forward for your cash flow, right? As we have discussed, the turnover rate, how much you can get, the transit, all that.
Okay. So again, determining your rental rate is key. And you know what? If you want to know, you can use your rent dashboard. All right. So another question is, sorry, we have a lot of questions, and that's great. So question from Andy: if I own a 2-bedroom and plan to rent out my 2nd bedroom, what things do I need to be aware of in the listing process and co-living with my tenant? That's actually a good question.
Yeah. Well, you got to like who you live with.
What should these people be aware of, though?
Aware of the listing process. I think you really need to know the people when you are living with someone. So it's not only about whether or not they can pay the rent. I found that you need to know whether or not you and your co-living tenants can get along. I think that's another, that played a big role in there, because when people live together, there tend to be.
Actually, that's true. I mean, in this question, I mean, it's not only just, their financial background, personal background might look great, but again, you know what, you're sharing a living space. So, it's really ultimately up to you, Andy, from the audience who posed that question, that you decide if you can actually live with this person, because you're seeing him or her, on a daily basis. So the next question is from Nicholas. Do you recommend focusing on cash flow or capital gain when investing in Vancouver?
Great question. Well, from my experience, you always want to have a cash flow to start off. Capital gain is a bonus when you look at it. And then you can, for us, I do invest myself. I look at a capital gain, but I also wanted to know whether or not I can pay off the mortgages on a monthly basis, right? I don't think I can pay everything in full. I need to get a mortgage, and is that property going to be rented out to pay the mortgage, and then so I can wait for the amount of time for my capital appreciation. If you're only looking for capital appreciation and then you don't have cash flow to feed your property, that might be very challenging for you to hold on to it, right? Mm-hmm. And I really say we are looking at long term. It's not like a short term thing.
That's good to hear. And actually, Stanley, the next audience member that sent a question, actually had the same question. So great, you already answered that. Another question from the audience member from Vivian. So my tenant just moved out, was paying $2,500 and recently rented for $2,200 in Vancouver downtown. Is that the trend?
I think so. The market has adjusted for the downtown Vancouver area. We have found the similar situation for our units as well, for the condos, especially in the very populated area.
All right, so I think that really sums up all the questions. Are there any more questions being submitted? Just gonna see.
A lot of good questions related to what we have talked about. It's great.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just, interested in how much they can get their like they see the price dropping. Their properties were rented out higher maybe a year ago, and now, they can't get the same price. So that, it does worry people. Another question just came from Adrian. Is it still worth investing in a downtown condo unit for 2021 and rent it out?
When the price is good, definitely look at it. If you're thinking about it, if you're buying a condo, one bedroom downtown Vancouver, looking at 700,000 and then generating about 1,800 to $2,000 rent, or you want to buy something close to SkyTrain for 500,000, generating about the same amount of rent. So that's something you need to consider. Yeah. However, if the price, we do snap on properties when they are underpriced or the price is very much reasonable and then you want to just go grab it. It depends on how much it is, right?
Oh, that's great.
But overall, the core areas, the value will stay. And the COVID will be gone, right? I have to say it's not going to be here forever. So once it's gone, the market come back. The core area still hold the best value.
All right, that's good to know. Another question that just came up. It's from Stanley. Oh, so Stanley's asking, hey, Kevin, how much do you charge for property management?
Well, I think I'm going to lose my job when leave rent has become very, very much helpful to the property owners. The charge in Vancouver are various. I can just give you a ballpark. It's from 6% to 8.5%, 9% on the management fee. It depends on the property, depends on the companies. I think it's more important for you to find a right property manager fit your portfolio. And then like where they work. If I only work in Vancouver, you don't want me to manage a property in Surrey, right? So that's also important to look at the synergy between the both parties.
Perfect. Another question. Wow, we have a lot of questions, so that's great. Do we find the trend for 2-3 bed units for extra room staying, or will people return to the city core and place convenience over square footage?
The human behavior is once they get used to something, they get used to it and they tend to stay where they are, right? They already have 1,000 square foot, a 2-3 bedroom now before they have a 700 square foot. For them to go back to a smaller unit would be a little bit difficult. However, with the inflow of people coming back, those properties are going to fill up soon too.
Okay. So don't worry, right? So you know what? Once restrictions relax,
yeah,
like downtown core. I mean, like no matter what, the city core is the city core, right? There's always going to be business people, coming in and wanting to live near the hype of being downtown.
In Toronto, attract a lot of talents. This year, we had quite a few people from Amazon, and then they want to live. Some want to live downtown, some want to live all downtown, get more space. As long as the city is running properly, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I actually I know a couple of friends that actually have rented to, like you said, Amazon was big last year still. A couple of years back was like a Google. It's like whenever there's a head office opening, you're going to get a big influx of out of province, out of country workers coming in. Right. All right, so question from Sherry. For renting a furnished apartment, would you recommend buying a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom for rent?
What do you think, Nick? You have experience too.
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends, right? So, in my opinion, I think, you know what, it's still the same. Like, what you're dumping in for the amount of money in, and you're gonna, I don't know. I would say still rent for 1-bedroom. I like the fast, the quick turnover rate in the sense that, I can always rent it out faster. Yeah. I don't 2 bedrooms, you're going to get a higher rental price. But, like once someone leaves I have a downtown unit, and once a tenant leaves, the next day I already lined up a new tenant. Mm-hmm. So, 2 bedrooms tend to be a little harder, but you know what, like Kevin has said, once you rent a 2-bedroom unit to a potential tenant, hey, they're going to stay for maybe not only a year, 2 years, 3 years, hey, even 4 years, like Kevin's Surrey tenant, right? So, and that way, ease of mind, and you don't need to worry. But for me, it's like, I just like I can always increase the rent every year based off the market. So, 1 year I rented for for 1,800, and then if the market's great, I'll rent it out for 22. So I don't need to actually sign a long-term contract. But that's my opinion.
Right, right. Yeah, certainly. I think you're right. The one bedroom furnished probably be better because there's more demand in the furnished rental in the smaller unit. That's what I found.
Okay. So a quick question from Terrence. How to determine what to set your rental rate at?
That's a great question. I get asked a lot of those questions when I meet my clients. Um, how to set a rent is very, very much critical. And you wanted to know the market. For myself, I look at the market pretty much every day. And for well, when I look at those prices, one thing good about Live Rent is when I post a property on there, I see all the property from the same building for a condo for a
Yes.
unit, and then I can compare the prices, which is so good. So I can compare the prices, see what other people are renting out for. If they're putting on $2,500 for a one bedroom at a Vancouver house, and then I probably go around the same price. But I do have to compare the features and size and everything else. That's also important. And then the listing dashboard gave you some good feedbacks on whether or not you are under the market or over the market. So that's a very critical to look at it as well. Yeah.
No, that's actually very awesome, Kevin. And I just want to explain that to our audience that if you've never used Live Rent platform, our listings, especially the condo listings, are separated by building. So in my building, 610 Granville, the Hudson, when you search the building, every listing in that building will be shown automatically. So if I want to list mine and there's 4 other listings available, right away I'll be like, okay, crap, like I'm listing for 2,300 one bedroom, but there's 4 other one bedrooms at 1,800. So you know what? Right away I know, hey, I'm $500 above price or above my competitor. You know what? Mine's probably going to get rented last. So like Kevin said, how the platform shows the building is great because you can actually compare really to see, and it also shows you the number. So it'd be like, some buildings in Brentwood have 31 listings. So it's like, okay, I have 31 competitors right now. I need to price my property great, or else, you know what? I'm going to be sitting on an empty home for like the next 6 months. So
for sure. You got to know your market. You got to know your competitors, and then it's right there for you. I think that's really helpful. I do my research before I meet my clients. I'll look at Live Rent and see what's in the condo, in the whole building, and then I give them good suggestions. So
so remember, our audience, like Kevin said, a professional even said that: research, research, research. Yeah. So okay, well that concludes our Q&A session. As no more questions have come in, so we're now ready to announce our 3 raffle winners. All right, so the 3 raffle winners today are Terrence Yee, Stanley Lam, and Tina Kwan with Quan. So congratulations to you 3 winners. We will be emailing you with more information on how to claim your prize. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and thank you for Kevin for being our lovely guest. I also want to give a huge shout out to the team that have put this webinar together, mainly Matisse, who's helped prep me in the last couple of days, Anne, who has done so much research, JD operating out of the back, Daniel, who has set up with my technical difficulties on my laptop, and even Sarah for content writing. So I want to give you guys a huge shout out. And once again, I want to give a huge shout out again to Kevin. So Kevin, thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate every opportunity working with Live Rent.
And remember, make sure, audience, make sure you guys subscribe to us if you haven't already. And if you have any feedback, please leave us a review on Google. And just again, there will be another live talk. So sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, Nick. Bye.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care.